Midnight. 3 knocks on my door. I opened it, and Sarah was standing there in a robe, hair still damp from a cold shower she'd clearly taken just to survive the heat, holding a pillow against her chest like she needed something to hold on to. "My AC just died," she said. "Can I sleep in here tonight?" I said yes before I'd even fully processed the question. What I didn't know in that half-asleep moment was that saying yes was about to complicate a relationship neither of us had actually started yet. Or that 3 weeks later, her actual boyfriend was going to walk in on something that looked exactly like what he thought it was, even though it wasn't. Not yet, anyway. I want to stay in that exact moment a little longer, because everything that mattered started right there. Not with some slow buildup I can point back to and say, that's when it began. It was the third night of a heat wave the whole city had been complaining about for a week straight. The kind of heat where standing still felt like effort, where the building's ancient window units groaned against air that refused to cool, even after midnight. My unit was holding up, barely. Sarah's had just given out completely. "It's dead," she said, still standing in my doorway, hair dripping onto her shoulders. Not even warm air coming out. Nothing. I called the emergency line and the guy basically laughed at me. Said maybe tomorrow, maybe not. No promises. "Come in," I said, already grabbing a blanket for the couch. "I'll take the couch, you take the bed." "You don't have to do that," she said. "Seriously, I can take the couch." "You're the one who can't breathe in your own room right now," I said. "Bed's yours. I'm not negotiating this at midnight." She didn't push back after that, which told me more about how bad that heat actually was than anything she'd said out loud. She climbed into my bed. I grabbed a pillow and headed for the couch, and that should have been the whole story. A roommate helping a roommate through one miserable night. Nothing more complicated than that. I should explain who Sarah actually was to me before that night, because it matters for everything that came after. We'd been roommates for 8 months, matched through a mutual friend after both our old living situations fell apart around the same time. We got along easily, same odd work hours, same weakness for a specific trashy dating show we both pretended to watch ironically. The kind of low-effort compatibility that makes an apartment feel less like a transaction and more like a home. Purely platonic. For 8 months, I never once thought of her as anything other than a good roommate, and as far as I could tell, she felt exactly the same about me. I remember how relieved I was when she moved in, honestly. My previous roommate had skipped out owing 3 months of utilities and left no forwarding address. Just a note on the counter, and an unanswered phone after that. Sarah's steadiness felt like a genuine reset. We built small rituals without ever really deciding to. Sunday grocery runs, a running commentary track during that dating show, an unspoken chore system that somehow just worked, without a single conversation about who owed what. About 6 weeks before her AC died, Sarah started seeing someone. Ryan, a guy from her office building. Casual at first, gradually turning into something more regular. I'd met him twice. He was fine, polite. Asked reasonable questions about my job over a shared dinner once. Didn't do anything that struck me as off. Just an ordinary guy Sarah was casually dating. He didn't register as significant to me, one way or the other. I mention all this because it matters for understanding how uncomplicated that first night actually was. I wasn't sitting on some secret crush waiting for an opening. I was a roommate helping another roommate survive a broken AC during a brutal heat wave. That's genuinely all it was supposed to be. The building's maintenance team, it turned out, was dealing with nearly a dozen AC failures across the property that same week, and Sarah's repair kept getting pushed. A new excuse every day. The part was backordered. The tech was booked solid. The building manager delivered his apologies with the kind of practiced helplessness that suggested this happened every summer, and nobody ever actually fixed the real problem. One night became 4, then a full week. We settled into a routine neither of us had chosen, but neither of us minded. Sarah in my bed, me on the couch. She started leaving fresh sheets out each morning, joking that she was running a very exclusive 1-star hotel. I started keeping a separate blanket just for couch nights. Small, domestic adjustments that felt, looking back, like both of us quietly settling into something we hadn't named yet. Around night 3, unable to sleep despite my own AC working fine, I found Sarah in the kitchen at nearly 2 in the morning, sitting with a glass of water, staring at nothing. I sat down across from her without really deciding to, and we ended up talking for almost an hour. The kind of loose, unguarded conversation that happens when 2 people are too tired and too hot to bother filtering themselves. "I keep thinking this is weird," she said at one point, turning the glass in slow circles on the table, and then I keep checking, and it's just not weird, which honestly might be the weirder part. Yeah, I said. It should feel strange. It doesn't. Neither of us said anything more pointed than that. But I remember lying on the couch afterward, wide awake for reasons that had less to do with the heat than I wanted to admit to myself. There was a smaller moment that week, too. One I didn't think much of at the time, but that I've replayed since. Night 5, maybe 6. I'd fallen asleep on the couch with the TV still on. Some documentary neither of us had actually chosen. Just background noise against the heat. I woke up around 3 to find someone had turned it off and draped the good blanket over me. The one from my own bed, not the couch one. Sarah's door was shut. I never asked her about it directly, and she never mentioned it. But I noticed. I noticed the way you notice a small kindness nobody's asking credit for. By the time the maintenance guy actually showed up, almost a full week after that first knock, I remember feeling something I didn't expect. A flicker of disappointment. Not because I wanted her AC broken forever, but because the excuse for the routine we'd built was disappearing, and neither of us had said anything that would let it continue without one. It's fixed, she told me that evening, standing in her doorway with the cool air finally working behind her. You can have your bed back. Cool, I said, and meant it, and also didn't quite mean it. And I think she heard both halves. By the end of that first week, something had shifted that neither of us had planned for, and neither of us was naming out loud. Sarah started staying up later in the shared space, even after her AC got fixed. Some easy excuse always attached. A show she wanted to finish, laundry that could have waited, nothing that actually required staying up. Just reasons to keep the evening going a little longer. I noticed I was doing the same, finding excuses to be in the kitchen when she was, offering help she didn't need, letting conversations run past the point where either of us could have reasonably said goodnight. About 10 days after her AC died, already fixed for 3 of those days, Sarah brought it up directly. The two of us on the couch, the show we were supposedly watching long forgotten in the background. Can I say something? She said. That's either going to make this weird, or is just going to name something we've both already been not saying for a week and a half. Go for it, I said. I don't know what this is. She gestured vaguely between us. The staying up. The finding reasons to be in the same room. I have a boyfriend. This shouldn't be happening while that's true, and I genuinely don't understand why it is anyway. I didn't have a clean answer for her either. I don't know what it is, I said. I just know I didn't want the AC thing to actually be over, even after it got fixed, which is a strange thing to admit. She let out a short laugh, more air than sound. I've thought that exact sentence, word for word, almost. Neither of us acted on that conversation right away. Sarah kept seeing Ryan, though she told me, in pieces over the following days, that it had started to feel more like maintenance than genuine interest. Something she was continuing out of momentum rather than any real pull toward it. I don't think it's fair to him, she admitted one evening, picking at the label of a water bottle instead of looking at me. Staying with someone because ending it feels like more effort than continuing it. That's not a good reason to be with anyone. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet, she finally looked up. I need to actually figure out if what I'm feeling for you is real, or if it's just proximity and a broken AC manufacturing something that won't survive going back to normal. I'm not going to blow up something with Ryan over a feeling that turns out to be about a heat wave instead of about you. I respected that she wanted to be careful, even though sitting in that uncertainty wasn't easy on my end either. I didn't push. I understood, even then, that this needed to move on her timeline, not mine, especially with someone else's feelings genuinely on the line in the middle of it. About 3 weeks after the AC died, everything Sarah had been quietly working through collided with the one variable neither of us controlled. Ryan showed up unannounced on a Saturday morning, wanting to surprise her with breakfast, and walked in at almost exactly the moment I stepped out of my bedroom in yesterday's clothes. Having fallen asleep on top of my own covers the night before while Sarah worked at my desk, both of us fully clothed, nothing having happened beyond 2 exhausted people losing track of time helping her finish a presentation. I heard his voice in the kitchen before I'd even fully placed who it was. By the time I walked out, he was standing there with a paper bag of bagels, and I watched his face do the thing where surprise curdles into something colder, in real time. Me coming out of my room. Sarah still in yesterday's clothes at the table. The whole scene reading exactly like what he assumed it was. You've got to be kidding me, he said, looking between us, his voice doing that thing where it's trying to stay calm and failing. Ryan, it's not what it looks like, Sarah said, and I watched her hear how weak that sounded even as she said it. Not because anything physical had happened that morning, but because she knew, underneath it, that something had been building for weeks, and it's not what it looks like, wasn't really true anymore. Not fully. Then tell me what it is, he said. Because from here, it looks like exactly what it looks like. Can we not do this with him standing right there? Sarah said, nodding toward me, and Ryan's jaw tightened. Oh, is that the problem? Fine. He set the bagels down harder than he needed to. You know, I drove 40 minutes to get these because you mentioned once, weeks ago, that you liked the everything bagels from that place by my office. I actually listened. I actually paid attention. And I come here to do something nice, and this is what I walk into. Ryan. No, I'm not. He cut himself off. Ran a hand through his hair. Tried again. Quieter this time. I'm not even mad about this exact morning, okay? Nothing happened this morning. Fine. I believe you. I'm mad because I think this has been happening for a while. Just not physically. And somehow that's almost worse. Because it means I've been an idiot for weeks, and you let me be. Sarah didn't say anything to that. Her silence answered the question more clearly than words would have. Can we not do this with him standing right there? She said again, quieter now. You. Can you give us a minute? Ryan said, not looking at me. I didn't wait to be asked twice. I grabbed my keys off the counter, caught Sarah's eye for half a second on my way to the door, a look that I hoped said, I'm not going to make this harder than it already is, and left. I walked for almost an hour, through the same heat that had started all of this. Not really going anywhere, just needing to not be sitting in the apartment while it happened. When I got back, Ryan's car was gone. Sarah was at the kitchen table, eyes red, a half-empty glass of water in front of her that she wasn't drinking. I told him everything, she said before I'd even sat down, that nothing happened this morning, that something's been building for weeks anyway, and that staying with him while that was true wasn't fair to him, no matter how you cut it. How'd he take it? About how you'd expect. Her voice cracked slightly on expect. He was hurt, angry for a while, and then just quiet, which was almost worse. He said something that I think was fair, actually, even though it stung, that I should have ended it the moment I knew what was happening, instead of letting him find out by walking in on something that looked worse than it was. Do you think he's right? Yeah. No hesitation. I was being a coward about it, honestly. Staying in the ambiguous part because it was easier than actually ending something. I should have been braver sooner. He didn't deserve to find out like that. I appreciated that she didn't try to make herself the hero of it, didn't reach for the version where she'd done nothing wrong. For what it's worth, I said, 3 weeks of genuinely trying to figure something out doesn't make you a bad person. I think it makes you someone who is trying to be careful about something that mattered. The timing just got away from you. Maybe. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, annoyed at herself for crying. I still wish I'd handled it better. He deserved better than a bag of bagels and an ambush. Sarah gave herself real, deliberate distance after that, about 3 weeks, before either of us said anything more about what had been sitting between us. Neither of us wanted to go straight from the wreckage with Ryan into something new. That felt like it would cheapen both things. Those 3 weeks were strange in their own quiet way. We still lived together, still crossed paths in the kitchen every day, both of us aware of something unresolved hanging in the space between us that neither had permission yet to touch. I gave her more room than usual, not coldness, just genuine respect for the boundary she'd asked for, even when it meant biting down on things I wanted to say. I need to actually know this is about you, she told me near the end of those 3 weeks. The two of us on the balcony one evening, the heat that had started all of it finally broken by a cooler stretch of weather. Not about the absence of him, not about the weird intimacy of a broken AC forcing us into the same space. I owe both of us that much clarity before we try to build anything real. So we let it exist without a name for a while. Dinners that were clearly more than roommate dinners. Conversations that ran later than they needed to. Small evidence stacking up that this wasn't dependent on a heat wave anymore. If anything, the feeling had only gotten clearer once the circumstances that started it disappeared. It wasn't proximity doing the work now. It was just there, on its own terms. I think I know now, she told me finally, on an ordinary Tuesday, with nothing dramatic attached to it. This was never really about the AC. It was about you. The AC just happened to be the thing that forced us into enough proximity to actually notice it. Somewhere in that stretch, I asked her the question I'd been sitting on since the morning Ryan showed up with the bagels. Do you regret it? Any of it? Not the ending it, the whole thing, starting with the couch. She thought about it longer than I expected. I regret the way it ended for him. I don't regret any of the rest of it, she said. I keep waiting to feel like I did something wrong by falling into this, the way I did, and I just don't. I think sometimes you don't get to pick the timing of things. You just get to pick how honest you are once you notice what's happening. I wasn't honest fast enough, but I got there. That's a generous way to put it. It's the true way to put it, she said. I could tell myself a story where I'm the villain of this, dragging Ryan along while secretly falling for my roommate. Or I could tell the actual story, which is that I was confused and scared of being wrong about it, and I took longer than I should have to sort that out. Both stories have the same facts. I'd rather live in the true one. I didn't have anything to add to that. I just remember thinking, somewhat clearly for the first time, that whatever this was going to become, I trusted the person building it with me to be honest about the parts that weren't flattering. That mattered more than the parts that were. It's been almost a year since that midnight knock. Since a dead air conditioner during a brutal heat wave turned into the relationship I never saw coming with a roommate I'd never once thought of as anything more than a roommate. Sarah and I are together now, genuinely, no longer performing the careful non-acknowledgement of those first 10 days. No longer needing bad weather as an excuse to spend time together. We still joke about how close it came to never happening. If maintenance had shown up that same night instead of a week later. If neither of us had been awake at 2 in the morning. If she just toughed out one hot night alone instead of knocking on my door. We're still roommates, technically, though the word doesn't really cover what the apartment is anymore. We eventually told our friend group the whole story, and most of them admitted they'd suspected something was building weeks before either of us said a word out loud, which amused Sarah and mildly annoyed her in equal measure, since she'd been convinced she was being subtle about it. Apparently I'm a terrible actress, she told me one night, laughing after our friend Diane confessed there'd been an actual betting pool running among the group about when we'd finally admit it. I really thought I was being so careful. You reorganized my entire bookshelf just because, during week 2, I said. That's not subtle. That's a woman nesting. Ryan, as far as I know, is doing fine. Sarah heard through a mutual friend that he's seeing someone new, and she told me she was genuinely relieved to hear it. Real relief, not performed. I think about the account she gave of herself that day at the kitchen table, more often than I'd have expected. How she didn't try to write herself as the hero. How she owned the specific cowardice of sitting in ambiguity longer than she should have, instead of finding a softer version of the story. I think that honesty is part of why I trust everything else she's told me since. We ran into him once, months later, at a grocery store of all places, both of us pushing carts down the same cereal aisle before either party noticed the other. There was a beat of pure, silent panic on all 3 sides. Ryan recovered first, nodded at me, actually. Something almost like a real acknowledgement rather than the cold civility I'd braced for. You two doing okay? He asked, and there wasn't an edge in it. Or if there was, it was small enough that none of us needed to address it. Sarah said we were. He said good, genuinely, and pushed his cart on toward the next aisle. And that was it. No scene, no lingering tension. Just 3 people who used to be tangled up in something difficult, standing in a cereal aisle, choosing to just let it be over. I think about that moment almost as much as I think about the morning with the bagels. How much smaller and quieter an ending can be than the version you brace yourself for. I've thought, too, about the version of this where maintenance actually showed up that first night, where Sarah never had to knock on my door at all. I don't know what our friendship would look like in that version. Maybe exactly the same. 2 roommates who got along fine and never found out there was more underneath it. Maybe something else would have eventually forced the same realization on a different timeline. I don't spend much time in that version. I'm too grateful for the one that actually happened. If there's one thing I've taken from all of this, it's that the relationships that end up mattering most sometimes arrive disguised as pure inconvenience. A broken appliance, an unplanned couch night, proximity that was never supposed to mean anything beyond getting through one bad night. Sarah knocked on my door because her AC died. Neither of us expected that knock to eventually cost her a relationship, put both of us through a hard, honest conversation neither of us wanted to have, and hand us something we hadn't even known we were looking for. I said yes to a simple, practical request at midnight, half asleep, without giving it a second thought. I don't think I've ever been more grateful for an unthinking yes in my entire life. Sometimes I catch myself telling this story to people at parties, usually after a couple of drinks loosen everyone up enough for someone to ask, "So how did you two actually meet?" And I still don't know how to make the short version sound as strange as it actually felt while it was happening. Her AC broke, doesn't cover it. We were already roommates, doesn't cover it either. The honest answer is closer to, we were standing right next to something good for 8 months, and it took a heat wave to make either of us actually look at it. If this one got you, tell me in the comments. And if you want more real stories like this, subscribe. There's a new one waiting for you every week.